Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers federal law enforcement rangers, taser use, and necessity, and is brought to us by a private submission. Before we dive into the interaction, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of this episode, YouGov. In today's economy, living on one income source is becoming increasingly more difficult, and finding the time to start a business or launch a side hustle can be equally as hard. Thankfully, there's an easy, free, and fun way to make extra cash in your spare time with YouGov. YouGov allows its users to earn points by taking short polls and surveys about topics ranging from politics and public affairs to products and brands, and convert those points into cash rewards or gift cards from some of the top brands on the market today. You get paid to give your opinion on topics that matter the most to you, like social media's influence on mental health, or whether or not you trust the mainstream media. I like to do surveys while I'm waiting in line or right before bed. YouGov paid for my last pair of AirPods, and I'm sure they will pay for my next pair once I lose these. If you find yourself with a few extra minutes to spare throughout your day, YouGov is the perfect way to stop boredom and earn cash fast. Thanks again to YouGov for sponsoring this episode. On June 25th, 2022, Justin Ebel, the owner of Ebel Voyagers Houseboats, responded to reports that one of his company's houseboats had run aground on a rock near Ash River Visitor Center on Lake Kabetogama at Voyagers National Park in northern Minnesota. In response, Mr. Ebel boarded his service boat, piloted it to the location of the houseboat, and pulled it off the rocks. Mr. Ebel then told his guests to follow him in the houseboat to a nearby bay where the waters were calmer, allowing the houseboat to be parked and inspected for damage. However, after Mr. Ebel had traveled a few hundred feet in his vessel, he turned around and saw that Rangers Steve Peterson and another park law enforcement official were attempting to board the houseboat. Mr. Ebel piloted his boat back to the houseboat's location, and his subsequent interaction with the Rangers was captured on a body camera.
That's all right. We're doing a contact with him. As soon as we're done with that, you can take him right wherever you need to go. What's that? No, that's not how this is going to work. Federal law enforcement officer. Okay.
Contact the boat once I get them secured out of this wind.
If you're going to enter...
We're going to have a real problem.
Okay. Hold on.
Let's go talk to him.
You want to talk to him first?
Yeah.
This is fine.
You don't have a permit to operate a business here anyway. All right, just power down. We'll just come talk to you.
No, I'm going in. I'm going to park them.
I said what you're doing right now is interfering with the agency's function.
Spot first.
Hey, calm down.
Reason for this.
Calm down. We're going to talk to you.
The Rangers introduce themselves as federal law enforcement officers and ask Mr. Ebel to stop his boat so they can talk to him. Voyagers National Park is subject to the concurrent jurisdiction of the state of Minnesota and the United States, and as such, federal National Park Service law enforcement rangers have broad authority to enforce federal and state laws within park grounds and waters. Under Section 102701 of Title 54 of the U.S. Code, NPS rangers, who are employees of the Department of the Interior, are responsible for maintaining law and order and protecting individuals and property within national parks. And in the performance of these duties, rangers are authorized to, quote, make arrests without warrant for any offense against the United States committed in the presence of the officer, and conduct investigations of offenses against the United States. As part of this authority, Section 3.4 of Title 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations states that an authorized NPS officer, quote, may at any time stop and or board a vessel to examine documents, licenses, or permits relating to operation of the vessel, and to inspect the vessel to determine compliance with regulations pertaining to safety equipment, vessel capacity, marine sanitation devices, and other pollution and noise abatement requirements. Now, while this broad grant of authority may seem like it conflicts with the long-standing requirement that officers must have at least reasonable suspicion of criminal activity to seize an individual or a vehicle, courts have consistently held that different standards apply to the search and seizure of boats. In the 1983 case of United States versus Villamonte Marquez, the Supreme Court held that customs officers acted, quote-unquote, reasonably under the Fourth Amendment when they stopped and boarded a vessel without reasonable suspicion, as permitted by Section 1581 of Title 19 of the U.S. Code. Now, while noting that, quote, no act of Congress can authorize a violation of the Constitution, the court considered, quote, the important factual differences between vessels located in waters offering ready access to the open sea and automobiles, such as the fact that while random spot checks of motor vehicles were unreasonable because the less intrusive alternatives of roadblocks and fixed checkpoints were readily available, quote, no reasonable claim can be made that permanent checkpoints would be practical on waters such as these, where vessels can move in any direction at any time and need not follow established avenues, as automobiles must do, and that, quote, while the need to make document checks is great, the resultant intrusion on Fourth Amendment interests is quite limited. However, the Supreme Court specifically limited this holding to vessels operating in waters with ready access to the open sea, and some courts have accordingly concluded that vessels on entirely inland waters cannot be stopped absent at least reasonable suspicion. For instance, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals concluded in the 1981 case of Blair versus United States that when seizing a vessel on inland waters with no allegation that the vessel crossed an international border, customs officers and state police needed to have had at least a reasonable suspicion that a vessel was engaged in illegal activity in order to lawfully conduct a brief investigatory stop. Nonetheless, courts have also approved of suspicionless searches of boats in inland waters, including the type of inspections NPS rangers are authorized to conduct. And although there is an argument that the rangers could not stop any vessel without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity or a safety violation, it is also possible that a court would determine that the rangers could stop the houseboat and Mr. Ebel without any sort of suspicion.
Yeah.
Stop!
Turn it off!
Shut the motor down!
Shut it down!
Alright, I told you to shut the motor down. You're in a law enforcement contact right now.
Okay, you're making this scene unsafe. You're making this scene unsafe. Shut it down.
Shut the motor down. I don't want to have to...
Not at all. Stop.
No, you are being seized in a law enforcement
Stop! Stop!
Why? What the f*** would you do that?
Because I'm trying to take care of my guest!
After Mr. Ebel refuses to stop his boat, the rangers board his vessel, wrestle him to the ground, and tase him. According to the National Park Service Law Enforcement Program Reference Manual, justifications for a ranger's use of force include defending self and others, effecting an arrest or investigatory Terry stop when lesser force is or would be insufficient, and restraining or controlling violent, threatening, or resistive behavior. Additionally, the manual states that tasers, also known as quote-unquote electronic control devices, quote, may be used on individuals who are actively resisting a commissioned employee or to prevent individuals from harming themselves or others when such force is objectively reasonable. Although the Supreme Court has yet to issue a decision establishing when using a taser constitutes excessive force, in the 1989 case of Graham versus Connor, it held that courts must consider 3 factors when determining whether a use of force is excessive. Now quoting, the severity of the crime at issue, whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to the safety of the officers or others, and whether he is actively resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight. Although the federal circuits have reached different conclusions as to when taser use is acceptable, in the 2009 case of Brown versus Golden Valley, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Minnesota, held that it was, quote, unlawful to taser a nonviolent suspected misdemeanant who was not fleeing or resisting arrest, who posed little to no threat to anyone's safety, and whose only non-compliance with the officer's commands was to disobey 2 orders to end her phone call to a 911 operator. Applying the 3 Graham factors to this situation, while it could be argued that Mr. Ebel was attempting to evade arrest by refusing to stop his boat for the Rangers, he was not suspected of a particularly serious offense, was unarmed, and did not appear to pose an immediate threat to the officer's safety. Additionally, at the time of the tasering, he had already been tackled to the ground with one of the Rangers pinning him down, and he did not appear to be resisting the Rangers' attempts to arrest him. For these reasons, Mr. Ebel would have a strong argument that his tasering was not only constitutionally excessive, but also also that it violated NPS policy, as it seems like the lesser force already employed to tackle him to the ground would have been sufficient to complete the arrest without resorting to the use of a taser.
Give me the other hand.
It's awkward in the spot there. Oh boy, you
got any weapons on you, sir?
weapons on board.
Is there anything in here that we need to know
No,
about?
there's nothing. Come on.
Okay. Just relax, all right?
This is totally unnecessary.
It is.
Until you
No,
escalate.
well,
it.
why can't I park my houseboat out of the
You're
wind?
in the middle of a law enforcement contact. You're interfering with the agency's functions.
I was trying to take care of my guests. You would have been more than happy to help you with it after I parked the boat. I'm not going anywhere.
I don't think you have a choice in that right now. Get you out in a boat. Of course you do.
Just hold me back. What was wrong with me getting them into the bay without the wind so we could deal with this? And what did you need to make contact with them for?
Because something happened on park property, right? They were stuck. They were on a buoy.
On a buoy that
Okay.
fell because the ice went out. This is crazy.
I understand that, but we still have to do a report to find out what happened.
It's going to be a great report.
That would have been.
I just don't know why you couldn't make contact after we were going to pull them in the park.
Because it doesn't work like that.
It's windy out here, and we got an old couple on there. They
This
just
is
hit a rock.
everyday
You know
weather
what?
for them.
I've lived here my whole day. If you know who kind of people I have to deal with, they don't know a damn thing about a boat. Tell her to come and have somebody get this boat in jail, and this is going to be listed.
I don't want it.
Well, you made it. Show Jesus Christ you didn't tackle me, right?
Not at all.
You didn't tackle me off
I
my
told you
seat.
to stop. How many times? I don't want to argue with you. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you.
You are a mother. You know that?
Wonderful. Great.
Don't even touch my.
You can't touch it right now.
Would you tell her I'm being arrested for? I got a business to run here. Hit it on speaker. Hey, I'm in handcuffed. I've been tased. I got tackled off my seat, and I got a bloody nose. And yet I got a houseboat running around in the wind with another one broke down the lake.
Is this seriously necessary?
It was because you interfered with the government function that we were doing. Started hollering at us and everything else.
Well, I don't. This is ridiculous.
The ranger claims that Mr. Ebel interfered with the government function by quote-unquote hollering at the rangers while they were trying to stop and board the houseboat. Section 232 of Title 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations, which defines the offense of interfering with agency functions, prohibits, now quoting, threatening, resisting, intimidating, or intentionally interfering with a government employee or agent engaged in an official duty or on account of the performance of an official duty, and, quoting again, violating the lawful order of a government employee or agent authorized to maintain order and control public access and movement during law enforcement actions. Nonetheless, as the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals summarized in the 2001 case of U.S. versus Pucha, quote, the Supreme Court has consistently held that the First Amendment protects verbal criticism, challenges, and profanity directed at police officers, unless the speech is shown likely to produce a clear and present danger of a serious substantive evil that rises far above public inconvenience, annoyance, or unrest. And while the sound recording quality of the body cam footage makes it impossible to hear everything Mr. Ebel said to the Rangers, to the extent his speech constituted verbal criticism and challenges to the Rangers' actions, it was likely protected by the First Amendment. However, it is important to note that Mr. Ebel admitted in an interview that he also radioed the houseboat to tell his guests to ignore the Rangers' request to pilot the boat to the middle of the lake in order to be boarded and follow him to Sullivan Bay instead. As the United States District Court in the Eastern Division of Virginia explained in the 2005 case of U.S. versus Twin, in which it upheld an interfering conviction under this statute against an individual who pointed out an undercover police officer to other individuals in a national park in order to interfere with the officer's investigation, quote, the First Amendment does not protect conduct that intentionally obstructs government operations. Therefore, while it is questionable whether Mr. Ebel's quote-unquote hollering would constitute interfering under this statute, it is more likely that he violated the statute by telling his guests to follow his boat instead of complying with the Rangers' orders. Likewise, if a court determined that the Rangers were within their authority to order him to stop his boat, it is probable that it would also conclude that his refusal to do so constituted interfering. wrong. In the 2011 case of U.S. versus Wild, the U.S. District Court in Alaska affirmed a conviction under this interfering statute against an individual who refused to stop his boat for NPS rangers conducting suspicionless compliance checks. In reaching this conclusion, the court rejected the defendant's argument of so-called necessity, which is a legal defense that contends that an individual was justified in committing a criminal act during an emergency situation in order to prevent greater harm. As the court explained in the Wild case, in order to prove necessity, a defendant must show, now quoting, that he was faced with a choice of evils and chose the lesser evil, that he acted to prevent imminent harm, that he reasonably anticipated a causal relation between his conduct and the harm to be avoided, and that there were no other legal alternatives to violating the law. The court concluded that although the defendant contended that stopping his boat was unsafe due to the potential dangers, he could not show that the harm was imminent because he did not present evidence of a specific danger that would have occurred if he had complied with the order to stop. Additionally, the court determined that the defendant had legal alternatives to refusing to comply with the order, such as attempting to vocalize his concern. Given the similar circumstances involved here, it is likely that a court would reject a necessity defense from Mr. Ebel in this situation, although the weather conditions and Mr. Ebel's failed attempts to propose alternative solutions to the Rangers could warrant a different decision.
Just have my mother.
I'm gonna call him
Just
right now.
bother him on a Saturday.
Okay.
Get that boat off my engines. Get the boat off my engines.
Sit down.
Get the boat off my engines. Pull it onto the side, you dip.
After the arrest, Mr. Ebel was taken to a hospital for medical examination and then to a jail in Bemidji, Minnesota for booking. The Rangers issued 5 federal citations to Mr. Ebel for disorderly conduct, failing to obey a lawful order, interfering, improper display of a vessel registration, and assaulting or resisting an officer. As part of a plea bargain, Mr. Ebel eventually pled no contest to the failure to obey a lawful order charge and was fined $200. The 4 remaining charges were dropped. Mr. Ebel reported in a February 2023 interview that about 2 weeks after the incident, his commercial use authorization for Voyageurs National Park was restricted, and that he was currently working on applying for the new year. He stated that he was informed he would get his authorization back, but that it would be probationary for 1 year. Overall, the Rangers get an F for maintaining a hostile and angry demeanor throughout the encounter, issuing potentially dangerous orders to the houseboat guests and Mr. Ebel, and unnecessarily employing a taser on Mr. Ebel. Rather than listening and considering other options when Mr. Ebel expressed his concerns about the safety of the Rangers' orders, the Rangers accused Mr. Ebel of interfering with their investigation, boarded his boat, tackled him, and tased him when he was already pinned on the ground. Now, while Mr. Ebel was not the most tactful in voicing his thoughts, the officers should have looked past his anger to see the reasonableness of the substance of his argument and allowed the boats to move to safer waters before attempting to board. Instead, the Rangers appeared to react when they were offended by Mr. Ebel's statements, even to the point of potentially using excessive force to retaliate against him. This interaction demonstrates why it is essential for officers to be open to feedback about their decisions and prioritize the safety of others over their own egos. Mr. Ebel gets a B- because although he was within his First Amendment rights to express criticism of the Rangers' actions, he exercised this right in an abrasive and non-productive manner and refused to comply with the Rangers' orders. While I understand his concerns about the safety of stopping the boats, his refusal to stop his boat and his statements encouraging the houseboat guests to ignore the Rangers' orders likely violated federal law. The legal system generally does not authorize citizens to rely on their own judgment to determine whether or not they want to comply with a law enforcement command. And the unfortunate reality of this fact is that it sometimes requires individuals to comply with orders they do not believe to be reasonable. While I cannot say for certain if the Rangers would have listened to Mr. Ebel's opinions if he had framed them as suggestions rather than as an immediate refusal to comply with their orders, Mr. Ebel's interests would have been better served if he calmly explained his concerns and proposed an alternative course of action instead of angrily attempting to tell the Rangers what to do. Now, of course, none of Mr. Ebel's actions justified the Rangers' use of likely excessive force against him, and I commend Mr. Ebel for his commitment to doing right by his guests. Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic that you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my second channel for even more police interaction content.